Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto meets a legendary black salamander of AIM. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Uzumaki Naruto was a loner. He was almost always seen alone and unhappy. Though most thought he was happy, it was a well-fabricated and crafted lie that he'd kept up to keep appearance, one might say. He'd say it didn't bother him to the old man, Tuchi and Ayame, but he was lying. It bothered him, very much so, actually. For some reason pretty much all of the villagers didn't think highly of him. The ninja guarded him with a cool sort of respect. They'd deal with him when they had to, and they wouldn't go much farther than that. They would do their duty, although some seemed to be just itching for a reason to punish him. The teachers at the academy ignored him for the most part, whether that was if he wrote on his desk, forgot, or even did his homework. It was usually regarded with a 0 if picked up at all, raised his hand, answered a question, or even asked one with or without permission. It was like he was a ghost in Konohagakure no Sato, only a ghost that could be occasionally seen and regarded with barely withheld fury and disdain. He was a pariah and had no clue why. He wasn't outright ostracized or beaten, except for that one time when a newly appointed drunken genin attacked him. He was never really harmed. Apparently he'd been executed for treason a few days later, but what was done to him was worse, in a way. He wasn't acknowledged, and that was all the little boy wanted. Acknowledgement on a positive level from the place he called home. Acknowledgement from the place he would one day lead as their Hokage and leader. Uzumaki Naruto was a loner. That, however, was about to change. Hands stuffed deep in his forest green shorts, Naruto continued to walk along the lonely path that was life, his current destination, the Naka River. He'd found the peaceful spot not so long ago, following Sasuke home, oddly enough. The lone Uchiha had broken off a little ways after the spot he was settling in and headed towards the compound where he and the rest of his clan used to live. Naruto briefly recalled some boys in class talking about a massacre of all the Uchiha. He would have to look more into that particular topic. Shaking his head, Naruto removed his blue sandals and dunked his feet into the water before pulling off his hooded shirt and bundling it up, creating a makeshift pillow and placing it behind his head. Beneath the shirt he wore a simple dark blue t-shirt. Soaking his feet, Naruto allowed his adolescent mind to wander. He still didn't really have any friends, but Iruka-sensei had saved him from no doubt dying at the hands of foreign nins, and Shikamaru had even hung out with him a few times after that. Iruka had told him Shikamaru had pretty much saved his life as much as he did. And wherever Shikamaru went, so did Choji and sometimes Ino, though it was clear she usually did so as a last resort. He now needed 2 hands to count the number of people that acknowledged him as a positive member of their community: Ayame and Tuchi Iruka, Hokage Jiji, Iruka-sensei, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi. He'd be Hokage in no time. As Naruto's thoughts made their way back to his classmates, for some reason unbeknownst to the boy, a small blush made its way upon his face as he thought of the blonde and her friend Sakura. They were both very pretty in his opinion, and popular if slightly on the unfriendly side. Well, Sakura more than Ino, that is. Sakura liked to make her point, and by extension, love for Sasuke very clear. Ino could be just as loud, but she seemed to have a pretty good hold on her anger, unlike the fiery pink-haired girl, though her tongue could be as sharp as the rest when it wanted to be. There was also that other girl. Hinata was her name? No, that wasn't it. Naruto bit his lip in thought, wading his feet through the water. Hinata. That was it. Naruto smiled, folding his arms behind his head and grinning at the clouds. If only Shikamaru could see him now. Naruto was taking his time enjoying the setting sun, knowing he'd need to head over to Ichiraku's if he wanted to eat before they closed. Only he really knew who bad he cooked. Everything besides instant ramen and a few other basic meals, that is. And the stores didn't like selling him stuff most of the time. If he went grocery shopping after dark and right before closing, they'd probably accuse him of stealing. Sometimes the store clerks were just too troublesome. It was with great hesitance that Naruto pulled his feet out of the river and slipped back into his shinobi sandals before tugging his hoodie back over his head. It was getting a little chilly, after all, and he didn't want to catch a cold. He was just about to turn and make his way back up the worn dirt path that stretched from the river to the main street when he saw it. A black and white salamander apparently locked in deadly combat with a wart-covered toad. The salamander was bigger than the toad, but not by much. The toad was rather chubby looking and reached about 8 inches high, with his knees bent and ready to pounce. It also happened to be a forest green color with tiny orange speckles dotting its skin in a few spots. The tallest point of the salamander was about mid-level with the toad, although from head to the start of the tail it was easily over a foot long. The salamander was also jet black from head to toe with an unusual white pattern on its back and from the looks of it, underbelly as well. Naruto's observation was cut short when the toad leapt at the salamander, brandishing what looked like a tiny little fork. The salamander was not one to be intimidated by toys and opened its mouth. A sickly colored purple mist floated from the dark cavern and struck the toad head first. It dropped to the grass twitching in mid-jump. The salamander wasted no time at all in advancing upon its prey, ripping into the toad with, from the looks of things, tiny and glinting razor-sharp teeth ferociously. "Well, damn," Naruto murmured, rubbing the back of his head in confusion. It wasn't every day someone saw a toad and salamander do battle. I can't wait to tell Choji someone has even worse eating habits than he does. As if listening to him, the salamander's head snapped towards Naruto, bloody teeth bared in a viscous little scowl that had a little bit of toad's leg hanging from his mouth. Naruto's stomach clenched uncomfortably at the gruesome sight. Now, he muttered pleadingly, "just go back to your dinner, yeah? I'll just be going now." Satisfied, the salamander went back to its meal, Naruto seemingly forgotten in his mind. Also satisfied his life was no longer in danger, Naruto began making his way towards his favorite eatery, his appetite still in place. Walking, he snorted, "I'm training to be a shinobi for Kami's sake. If I don't have an appetite after that I don't deserve to be one." The next day after class, Naruto went back to the river, not intent on seeing the salamander. No, it was just his normal spot and he'd be damned if that little shit scared him off. Shikamaru and Choji were apparently going on a clan trip with some members of both their clans as well as the Yamanaka of Konoha. It was supposedly a comradely thing Naruto knew next to nothing about. Shikamaru has said his father allowed him to come but he didn't want to impose upon them. Not only was he the only person with the name Uzumaki in Konoha, he wasn't even sure if they were a clan at some point in time. Not many people liked him and he didn't want to risk ostracizing Shikamaru and Choji amongst their clans, thus risking the loss of his first friends. No, Naruto would take one for the Team Naruto, and stay put. Besides, who else would bother Sasuke if he was gone, too? Satisfied with his own train of thoughts, Naruto removed his sandals again, and, like the day before, placed them in the cool water waiting below and got himself comfortable. He didn't have to wait long before he heard rustling in the tall grass to his left. Stumbling through the grass was the salamander he had seen yesterday feasting upon a toad, only it was hurt. Its front right leg looked to be missing a few chunks and its tail seemed to be half the size it was than the first time he'd seen it. A moment later a red toad with yellow spots emerged, this one not only bigger than its brethren but much larger than the black and white salamander in front of him. While the salamander reached a little over his ankles at best, the toad in front of him nearly to his knees and a miniature tanto was easily visible in its hands. The toad let out a little garble that Naruto assumed was supposed to be an intimidating war cry and sprung forwards, intent on killing the salamander and avenging his clan it seemed. The salamander was not to be outdone, snarling and spitting out a yellowish-green substance that the toad managed to evade. Naruto could only gape as the liquid began to eat away at the grass it had landed on. The toad was not to be bested though, as it landed before fainting to the left and springing back towards the salamander, ready for another round. Not to be outdone again, the salamander burrowed its way underground in a flash, easily eating through the soft grass and dirt. Stomping its little feet in annoyance, the toad croaked to itself as it peeked into the dark hole the salamander has just escaped into. Now, Naruto was training to be a ninja, and a ninja should know that they'd see very strange things on occasion and were supposed to rein in their shock and do their duty. Naruto was positive that this didn't count as he promptly fell over, landing on his ass when 3 identical black and white salamanders erupted from the ground, 2 creating new holes and the last coming back out of the hole it had made, promptly fading into dust when Toad's tanto made contact with it. "Shit," Naruto whispered, eyeing the fight with obvious interest. "That little salamander can create a better bunshin than me. Even though the salamander had created some serious bunchin', the toad was not one to fall for tricks, easily dispatching the fakes and advancing on the salamander, who looked to be tiring quickly, his wounds seemingly overtaking him. The salamander backed away from the tanto-wielding toad, slowly making its way towards the river, its eyes darting back and forth. The toad continued advancing. As the toad continued to advance upon the salamander, Naruto made his choice then and there. A choice that would forever chance the shinobi nations and Konoha in general. Three things happened in very quick succession. The toad swung his tanto, the salamander leapt back, and Naruto chucked a kunai with as much force as he could at the toad. Three small noises were heard in very quick succession. The salamander landed safely atop the slowly churning river. A kunai buried itself to the hilt in the toad's back, the tip of the blade erupting from the toad's chest in a shower of gore right before the toad fell. The final thunk, dead and defeated. Naruto couldn't hold in the little whoop of joy that had threatened to break out at his successfully thrown kunai. Target practice indeed. Yata, why are you so excited, boy? You've killed a toad. Yar, yar. Thank Kami you've decided to grace the elemental nations with your presence. Naruto blinked, once, twice, 3 times before lowering his eyes and coming to a conclusion that it was the salamander mocking him. The shock of actually speaking to a life form not known for, well, speaking wore off a little when he remembered that many summons could speak as well. Naruto crossed his arms across his chest. You could say thank you, he muttered, frowning. The salamander spared Naruto a lazy look, and up close Naruto was able to see a helmet-like marking. More like a broken crown. Atop the salamander's head in the same tone of white as his back and belly before looking back at the cooling corpse of his opponent. I had it under control. You could have at least said thanks, Salamander-san, said Naruto, raising his chin and sniffing slightly. Salamander-san? I have a name, boy. Not like you gave it to me, Naruto muttered, more to himself than the salamander. I suppose I owe you that much, Dokueki, at your service, child. Naruto frowned. Uzumaki Naruto, he said curtly. Well, I'll be going now. Aren't you going to, you know, said Naruto, waving towards the dead toad. What, eat it? No thank you. That was your kill, your meal. Naruto grimaced. He knew that eating your own kill and finding a meal when you didn't have the luxury of eating a cooked meal by someone else or something packaged was the shinobi way. You keep what you kill, Iruka had said. But he was barely 9 and didn't really feel like gutting a possibly poisonous toad and eating it just because some salamander said it was the thing to do. Feel free to have it, said Naruto, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Thanks, kid, said Dokueki, giving a little shrug before turning slightly and making his way towards the fallen toad. So, Naruto drawled as Dokueki dug into the toad with relish it seemed. Perhaps it was little revenge, or maybe he was just hungry. Are you from Konoha? Not really. Are you what is it called? A summon? Possibly. Really? Who do you serve? The salamander looked at him sharply, sending a few innards he'd been chewing on array. You ask a lot of questions, he said, baring bloody teeth. Naruto didn't seem too threatened or worried. Just curious. I've never met any summons before except for Gigi's monkey. Monkey, Gigi? You must be talking about Sarutobi's old, decrepit ass. Yup. Naruto chirped, happily. So who do you serve? I'm a salamander, the salamander provided, going back to its meal. Salamander, salamander, Naruto muttered, rubbing his chin in thought. I've heard that only a very powerful ninja uses the salamanders. What was his name? Danzo? No. Lando. Yeah, that's is. Lando of the salamander. Dokueki swallowed the heart of the toad he had just been tearing into. A delicacy amongst salamanders. Before letting out a raspy chuckle. If Hanzo heard you calling him that, he'd probably kill you. Dokueki eyed Naruto seriously before lowering his head and turning back to his meal, or turn you into his weapon. Me? Naruto questioned, pouting for a moment before grinning and jabbing a thumb at himself. Naruto. Dokueki snorted but did not look up. Cute, kid, really cute. Aren't you a little chibi shinobi? Naruto didn't seem to have any more questions for the time being, thoroughly insulted and defeated, instead settling on just observing the little salamander as it ate. Little, however, was the wrong word to use, as it was easily over a foot long, and that wasn't even counting its tail, while its head could probably take a bite out of his shin without any effort. This also gave Naruto to give him another look. His previous observations were confirmed when he noticed the blotchy white markings on its back. They did, in fact, and oddly enough, bear a striking resemblance to that of a spider, while the top of his head seemed to be covered in a shattered crown. Dokueki was also, as Naruto had previously noticed, missing a large chunk of his tail and several fingers on its right hand. The wounds looked clean though, obviously caused by the enemy toad's blade. "Hey," Naruto spoke up as Dokueki was finishing up his meal, "do you need any help?" Now Naruto was by no means a medic nin at all. His chakra control was positively horrendous, but he felt that Dokueki didn't need to know that at the moment. Perhaps the salamander would appreciate the gesture of him trying and failing instead of not trying at all. Hopefully he didn't just mock him some more. Dokueki's tongue darted out, licking some residual blood left on around its mouth. "Help? Yeah," said Naruto, wriggling his fingers and giving his lower half a little shake. "That," said Dokueki, chuckling, "is already being taken care of." Naruto should have known the salamander had another ace up his non-existent sleeve, and that was only confirmed when the injuries Dokueki had. And there were actually more than actually visible. Little nicks and cuts hidden by the color of his skin began to glow a familiar shade of green Naruto had seen on a few occasions. The salamander was healing itself. "Why am I not surprised?" Naruto muttered, and it was actually quite the contrary, as he was in fact very surprised. "What can I say? I'm just that good," said Dokueki, giving Naruto a toothy grin. "Arrogant little bugger, aren't y'all?" As Naruto and the salamander traded jibes, a bond was formed. The boy wouldn't know for a while that the little salamander he had helped do battle with a toad was one of his most precious people. Nobody would know how big of an effect a 9-year-old spotting a salamander fighting a toad could make, just like nobody would have guessed a simple sighting would turn a young, lonely boy into one of the most powerful shinobi the elemental nations had seen since, well, his father. "Shut up, Naruto," Iruka bellowed, glaring at the whisker-faced boy. Part of the academy student was positively mortified due to being yelled at in front of the entire class, but deep inside, a much larger part was beaming at the praise. He wasn't being ignored anymore. Iruka-sensei really did seem to care, even if he showed his way of caring through yelling. Too bad he wasn't able to catch up with Shikamaru and Choji with Iruka breathing down his neck. He'd take the acknowledgement over the partial conversation anytime. "You're just too troublesome, Naruto," Shikamaru muttered from his self-made pillow of folded arms. "It's impossible to sleep without Iruka-sensei yelling thanks to those two troublesome harpies squealing, but with him." Shikamaru gave his head a little shake and trailed off, attempting to go back to sleep. Naruto snorted, turning slightly in his seat so he was facing more towards Choji, who happened to be munching on a bag of chips. It was odd how Iruka didn't have a problem with Choji eating, Shikamaru and Kiba sleeping. Most of the time, that is. Or Ino and Sakura jabbering back and forth about who was going to finally win Sasuke's heart. The latter usually got under Naruto's skin the most, though he admitted it to nobody. Once again, a piece of Naruto was a little ticked off at the fact that Iruka was picking on him, but a bigger part of him was ecstatic that Iruka happened to notice every little mistake he made. No one else had ever managed to pick up on the fact that Naruto was the one that actually peed on the toilet seats and not Akamaru. "Hey," Naruto whispered, attempting to be stealthy, "you guys want to go to the park later?" Shikamaru grunted what he knew to be an affirmative while Choji nodded with a mouthful of food. "Hey," Kiba whispered. His seat was to the right of Choji and he picked up what was said. "I ain't got nothing better to do, so I'm coming too." "Whatever, dog breath," Naruto mumbled out the corner of his mouth as he looked forwards worriedly at Iruka-sensei and completely missed a glare sent his way. "Why don't we just invite the entire class, Sure, why not?" Kiba mumbled, but Naruto didn't seem to pick up on the sarcasm in the Inuzuka's tone. Hey, Shino. Wanna go to the park with us?" Naruto shouted to the Aburame a few seats away. "Going to the park with you would just be a waste of my time." "Why? I am actually trying to become a competent shinobi, which is something the four of you should be doing as well if you wish to make it past the Chunin exams," the Aburame answered with little to no emotion in his voice. "Asshole," Naruto muttered, unable to control himself. "The fact that I'm not going with you to the park does not make me an asshole," said Shino back, his tone of voice never changing, but a faint buzzing noise could be heard growing louder and louder. Bastard. Again, Naruto couldn't control himself. Shino really could be a prick sometimes. Naruto could only shriek like a girl as a swarm of bugs converged on him. Ow, baka. If we're going to use blunted kunai, don't aim for the face. I was aiming for your torso. Naruto shouted back, grimacing at his poor aim. Missing the targets was one thing, but damn near taking out Kiba's eye was something totally different. Even so, the feral boy was smiling good-naturedly and Choji was snickering with Shikamaru managing a snort of his own. You really need to work on your aim then, said Kiba, rubbing his sore face. Suddenly, a wicked grin split his animalistic features. Sasuke-kun hit all the targets, he drawled out. Grinning maniacally, Naruto prepared another kunai. After the group dispersed, Naruto got to work. Kiba was right. His aim did need a fair amount of work and he wasn't going to get any better if he didn't practice. Palming a kunai, Naruto let it fly with a flick of his wrist. Not a moment later the kunai embedded itself several inches below the target mat, not hitting the bull's eye or even mats itself. Frowning, Naruto sent several more at the target and missed spectacularly with all of them. You're too tense, said a voice from behind him, and your stance is incorrect if you're going to throw from that angle. Naruto turned towards the voice, a kunai prepared even though it'd probably just get him laughed at only to stop. The salamander was speaking to him again. And how do you know? You're a salamander after all, he said in exasperation as if it explained everything. When you get older you'll learn to pick up things and from the looks of it you're putting too much effort into simply throwing a kunai. I sure do hope that Kami is on your side if you plan on putting this much effort in your throwing skills when fighting enemy shinobi. Thanks, Naruto grumbled, turning back to his targets and palming another kunai. You're too flat-footed and your aim is going to be off, again. Spread your legs a little and stay on the balls of your feet when throwing, relax. Despite being ordered around by a mere salamander, Naruto did as he was told. Relaxing and taking a few deep breaths he spread his legs a little, putting his left a tad bit in front of his right and took aim. He didn't hit the center but he managed to nick the mat, whereas before his aim had been quite literally all over the place. Thanks, he muttered, eyeing the salamander. You're welcome, Naruto, said the salamander, grinning. You're Dooku, right? Dokueki, was the bland reply. Rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, Naruto grinned. Thanks for the tips. Dokueki inclined his head slightly, eyeing the targets instead of Naruto. I hadn't suspected you to be this bad at throwing a kunai after seeing you in live combat. Despite it being a salamander and having been insulted in the same sentence, Naruto felt himself flushing at the small bit of praise. That was just adrenaline kicking in. I know what you mean, Dokueki muttered. Naruto nodded and went back to his practice, Dokueki adding little hints here and there when Naruto took out some shuriken he had and a few senbon he'd found. In the few hours they spent in the clearing, Naruto's skill at throwing kunai, shuriken and senbon had increased more than ever before. Neither seemed to care that it had darkened and Naruto was passing the time he'd normally be in bed by as they continued to talk, and in Naruto's case, practice. It all happened to be thanks to a black and white salamander he'd saved not a week earlier. The legend of Uzumaki Naruto was still just in its infancy. You look like crap, Naruto, was Kiba's blunt statement as he took a seat next to the blonde. Class would be starting in a few minutes. Naruto managed a weak grin from his position face down on his desk. I'm pretty sure I could nail you in the balls with a kunai right now. Wanna see? Paling drastically, Kiba shook his head. Naruto's poor aim was legendary, and even if he wasn't hit in the balls there were many other vital points the blonde could take out with his horrible aim. Better aim? A lazy voice floated up behind them. Naruto having better aim is just plain troublesome for the rest of us. MFMPH, that's right, Shika, mumbled Choji around a mouthful of chips. Naruto's eye twitched. Does anybody here want me to be a competent shinobi here? Naruto completely missed the fidgety nod of a lavender-eyed kunoichi as a voice spoke up in monotone. I for one find it commendable that you are actually working towards making yourself something resembling that of a shinobi. Less orange would also be a welcome sight. Less orange? Naruto almost shrieked, eyeing the orange shirt he was wearing. Everyone knew his favorite color was orange if the jumpsuit he'd purchased not too long ago was anything to go by. The class would definitely have cause for concern if he started wearing the neon jumpsuit every day in place of his shorts and short-sleeved hoodie. He was making a point. If the Yondaime could wear a white cloak with flames on the bottom of it and still be badass, then he'd wear orange and be just as badass. Just wait, he thought. One day I'll be so powerful that when I wear orange it won't even make a difference. Orange is quite the troublesome color, Shikamaru mumbled. Sometimes I can't even look at you properly when the angle is off due to the lighting. Naruto glared, silently vowing to never wear the orange tracksuit he'd bought. And to think, I nearly bought several copies of it. They'd never let me live it down. Assholes. Be quiet, class. Now, today we'll be working on the clone technique again. Frowning, Naruto flew through the 3 simple hand seals. Ram, snake, tiger, Bunshin no jutsu, he cried, his voice echoing off the trees of the clearing he was in. A single, sickly-looking clone greeted him when the small amount of smoke dispersed into nothingness before it abruptly flopped to the forest floor, retching so hard it disappeared with an audible poof. Growling, Naruto flew through hand seals again, meeting the same result. Too much. Spinning on his heel, Naruto looked down curiously. Dokueki, I thought you died, Naruto exclaimed. He hadn't seen the salamander in a little over a month. I'm here, am I not, came a dry retort. That you are, said Naruto, grinning. It was thanks to the salamander that Naruto was now competent at throwing kunai, shuriken and several other ninja tools. What did you mean, too much? You're pushing too much chakra into the jutsu, trying too hard, again. Try this, instead of attempting to make just one clone, aim for 100 or so. 100 or so? Naruto exclaimed. Dokueki nodded and began pacing back and forth a little. It was an odd sight, seeing a salamander lecture like Iruka-sensei liked to do sometimes when he really got into the lesson. Your chakra reserves are some of the largest I've seen in my lifetime, and you are but a boy of 10. You also happen to have some of the worst control of said chakra I've also ever seen. People would kill to have reserves of your size if it meant having to practice a little chakra control. Why should I make more clones than if I can't even make one? Naruto whined. First, your control is so bad you couldn't possibly just make one. Hell, you could probably make several hundred, but you wouldn't even come close to the goal you set with your control at the moment, which is why you are just going to go through the seals and allow the chakra to designate how many clones you make. Don't force it. Second, the clone technique requires little to no chakra at all. Dokueki frowned. If you wish to make just one clone in the future, you will need to find a technique that requires more chakra. There are more clone techniques? Yes. Dokueki sighed. There are quite a few. Earth, water, lightning and sand, just to name a few, and they are actually solid for the most part, unlike the illusionary jutsu you're currently working on. Naruto grinned. So just go through the seals and let my chakra guide me to success, That would be your best bet, yes. Quickly moving through the 3 simple hand seals, Naruto could only gape at the several thousand perfect replicas of himself. Clone jutsu, indeed. Yata. Once the first step was complete and Naruto completely mastered the basic clone technique, Dokueki even managed to help Naruto get down the Mizu Bunshin with relative ease. He had no clue if the boy held an affinity to water, but if his last name was anything to go by, then the ability to mold water chakra ran through his blood. As Naruto high-fived with a solid water clone, Dokueki grinned at the childlike smile plastered on both Naruto and his clone's whiskered face. Things were moving on smoothly. Perhaps the salamanders would shed their current air of disgrace thanks to Hanzo and rise to power once more with the help of Uzumaki Naruto. Yes, he thought as Naruto managed to create a half-dozen perfect water clones, we'll do it with his help. Hey, Sakura-chan. Sakura-chan. You wanna go on a date with me? No, baka. Sakura's fist then connected painfully with Naruto's face. Why was he smiling then? A moment later the clone exploded in a shower of water that drenched the pink-haired student. Suffice to say, the class found it hilarious, Iruka found it impressive, Sakura was furious, and Naruto had already fled the classroom for the day. Sakura was too nervous to actually hit Naruto the next day, as the water clone had been able to fool them pretty good. Alright, class, said Iruka patiently, smiling fondly at his class. With Naruto taking things seriously, for the most part, he was able to spend much more time actually teaching and training his students instead of either helping Naruto extra or worrying if something was wrong with his desk. We're going to be working on the substitution technique today, better known to some as a kawarimi. To demonstrate this point, Iruka then swapped places with a sulking Mizuki. "Now," he said from the other side of the classroom, "who would like to try first?" It was no surprise that Naruto raised his hand before getting up and swaggering to the front of the class. He normally was the first to volunteer even if they hadn't practiced the technique, knowing full well he'd fail much like every other student in the class on their first attempt. Sometimes he really was a glutton for punishment. Little did anyone know Dokueki had already schooled Naruto on both the Kawarimi and Shunshin. The Kawarimi had been a piece of cake, but the Shunshin was still a bit out of his league as his chakra control was still shit. They are both techniques a ninja must know if they wish to survive. A lily genin should know the Kawarimi years before they graduate and the Shunshin before they go out for their first mission. Hanzo was particularly well known for his use of the Shunshin, as was the late Uchiha Shisui. "If I have my, you will be much the same." Naruto turned towards the class and made a show of slowly going through the hand seals, with a few whispered words, for effect of course. He was sitting atop of Kiba's desk with a happily yipping Akamaru in his arms while Kiba angrily dusted himself off and made his way towards Naruto. "Well done, Naruto," Iruka praised, eyeing him speculatively. "Very well done. Now, who'd like to go next?" The sight of Sasuke failing on his first attempt left a sweet taste in Naruto's mouth like that of piping hot miso ramen. He knew it wasn't good to gloat as his first time wasn't in front of the class, but still. "Nice try, Sasuke," said Iruka gently. As Sasuke made his way back to his seat, he and Naruto locked eyes. "HN," he said, giving a curt nod of respect to the blonde. "HN." Naruto returned the gesture, although he happened to be smirking unlike Sasuke, who had been grumpy. "Cha, leave Sasuke-kun alone, Naruto." "Hey Sakura, I learned how to make a clone out of dog shit, wanna punch it?" Sakura didn't say another word to Naruto all day, and as cute as Sakura was, it didn't seem to bother him all that much. Naruto stood in one of the unused training grounds, panting and drenched in sweat. His hands and feet were sore and nearing their limits, tape or not. "Nice workout," Dokueki complimented. Naruto smiled, he'd been waiting for him to show his face. "Thanks, I've gotten the academy style down pat, but it isn't enough," he admitted, shaking his head. "No," Dokueki agreed, "it isn't." Taking out his canteen and drinking deeply from it, Naruto frowned as he wiped his face. "They teach us the bare minimum and hope we don't die. For us, without family or anyone to help us, we never are able to get ahead. I know Sasuke doesn't have a family anymore, but he still has his family style of taijutsu, as does Kiba and Choji. Defeating Sasuke in a spar is damn near impossible." Dokueki hid a grin. "You wish to learn a new style of taijutsu?" At Naruto's vigorous nod, he continued. "Begin stretching, now, and every morning, and before you do any kind of training, whether that be kunai and shuriken throwing, practicing clone techniques, or even homework. Stretch, and when I deem you fit, you will begin to learn." And so he stretched, and he stretched, and he stretched. Naruto knew better than to question Dokueki, as he hadn't once led him astray or did something without meaning. He also knew that if he questioned the sadistic little salamander, he'd be put to work even harder. And as much as Naruto liked working hard, he liked being able to get up in the morning without wincing in pain. "Enough, enough?" Naruto repeated, slightly confused many weeks later. "You are ready to begin learning salamander style, better known as Odori no Sanshao, dance of the salamander." "Really?" Naruto asked excitedly. "Yes. Now do exactly as I say and you may become competent." And competent Naruto was. He picked up everything like a sponge. Well, everything that was able to hold his interest. Other things he usually deemed unnecessary and didn't pay it attention, so it obviously fled his mind the moment he let the subject drop. Stuff like distance to time was lost on him, but things like where to put a kunai to disable someone with killing them stuck to him like smell on Kiba. Taijutsu just happened to be something that really interested Naruto. The salamander style wasn't what many would consider taijutsu, not really, anyway, and not many could pick it up. The style itself relied on flexibility many didn't have, and to really grasp the technique it had to instilled at an early age, preferably before the ninja learning it lost himself in the crisp, curt, cool and calculated life that a ninja lived. It relied heavily on bending and flexibility, but more than anything it relied on going with the flow. Not precise strikes where the user knew where they were going. The salamander style wasn't based on luck, but it was a part of it. No, The style was more about taking open and wide shots. Some many would consider dangerous and downright idiotic most of the time. That would be true if they hadn't mastered the style and foolishly attempted. Thus it just happened to be the perfect style for Naruto, who had amazing flexibility and was willing to take a blow if it came to it. He feared little, and a fist to his chin wasn't one of them. "Good," said Dokueki. Naruto was currently upside down, his hands planted firmly on the ground with his feet not too far away, stuck to the earth with a thin layer of chakra. He looked like the letter U. Enough. Naruto let the chakra holding his feet to the ground slip away as he stood up calmly, shaking his head a little to clear it. "What now, sensei? There isn't much more I can teach in this aspect," he admitted, sparing Naruto a grin. "Repetition isn't good, nor is it necessary with this style. Just keep stretching whenever you can." If Dokueki had eyebrows, Naruto figured they'd be furrowed at the moment. A weapon would also help. "I have kunai, shuriken and senbon." "No." He shook his head. "Something with reach and flexibility, something unorthodox." Hanzo was known for using a kusarigama, a sickle and chain, with deadly ease and precision even against the finest samurai the land of iron had to offer. The movements provided through our style only helped him, and the chain added an excellent amount or reach. "What should I do then, sensei?" Naruto asked, chewing his lip. "Don't worry. When the time comes you'll know what to do. I am sure, Naruto. Now, let us return to your apartment and have some of that delicious ramen." Months passed and Naruto continued to train with Dokueki in secret. People knew he was getting better, they just couldn't figure it out. Some people were pleased by this, while others were both envious and appalled that that kid was becoming an actual ninja with some skill. Though none dared say it out loud, most just wished he'd graduate and die on his first hard mission. He trusted what friends he had, but he didn't want to bother them with his troublesome problems, as Shikamaru would have called it. There would be time soon enough for them to have actual worries about living and dying due to a proper clone or taijutsu style, so he wanted to keep it as friendly as possible for what little time he actually had left. You never knew when your card was going to get punched in the ninja world, after all. As it was, Dokueki helped Naruto with what Iruka-sensei and his friends couldn't, and the classes didn't actually cover for the most part. Advanced chakra control, leaf sticking and tree climbing, and other techniques the Salamander thought useful. Some of the stuff was fairly unique, while other information was stuff people picked up over time. Which mushrooms were edible, which were useful for healing purposes, and which could be used in making different kinds poisons, ranging from the kind that'd be coated on a blade to the kind that'd be placed in a cup of tea. To say that Naruto wasn't the dead last anymore would be akin to calling Uchiha Sasuke as friendly as a box full of fluffy brown kittens with little red bows. That prestigious title was handed over to Kiba, who didn't have the natural book smarts as Shikamaru did and didn't quite care enough to put forth his best efforts like some others did. Naruto for one and Sasuke for another. All in all, Naruto was only a single spot behind the last Uchiha and was damn proud to say just that. He'd show that Teme one day, though. Believe it, he'd show them all one day. Believe it. Flexing in the mirror, Naruto admired his minuscule muscles appreciatively. He wasn't ripped, and doubted he ever would be, but he was getting there. He sure as hell had more muscles than Shikamaru and Choji. Possibly Kiba, but who really knew what kind of supplements those Inuzuka were fed, and nobody got to see what Shino really looked like with that jacket that covered nearly all of him. He's probably got fat thighs, Naruto thought, nodding sagely before looking himself over once more. "I look badass though," he mumbled. "Modest as ever, I see," said Dokueki from his place on Naruto's kitchen table. Flushing in embarrassment, Naruto pulled on a t-shirt before throwing the Salamander a rude hand gesture. "I'm just admiring the fruits of labor, as they say, or the youthful seeds that are in full bloom. All the hard work we've been doing is starting to pay off, finally." Dokueki nodded politely. "It is, but that does not mean you have to give yourself a show every time you dress and undress. We also aren't doing this so you can pile on muscles, Naruto." I know, he murmured before holding his chin a little higher and standing rigid. "We are doing this to bring respect and fear back to both the Uzumaki and Salamanders." "Exactly. Now, Naruto, I would be forever in your debt if you were to just bring that bowl of ramen a little closer for me." Naruto did just that, wincing ever so slightly. Dokueki's addiction to ramen was going to put him back a few ryu. Why am I doing this? Naruto mumbled. There were several leaves sticking to his fingertips. To help with your still horrendous chakra control, Dokueki answered without missing a beat. I wish to teach you the few jutsus I know of, but I can't if your control is horrible. Yeah, he mumbled as he began going through his stretches. The leaves never left their places on his hands. Get to work, Naruto, said Dokueki. Naruto did just that. So what kind of awesome jutsus you going to teach me, Naruto asked excitedly as he went through a set of sit-ups. It would have been a normal sight had Naruto not been hanging upside down from a tree branch with only a layer of chakra keeping him from falling to the ground below. I have something you need to be able to do before we move forwards and teach you a few jutsus. Naruto nodded. Which jutsus? He eagerly asked, completely disregarding what his mentor had just said. The Salamander sighed. Two simple ones. The Great Fireball technique the Uchiha clan is known for, and a water technique the Uzumaki clan was once known for, raging waves. Great, he chirped. When can I learn? A toothy grin tugged at Dokueki's face. When you can do this? This just happened to be walking on the water without a hint of worry or trepidation. Dokueki was as comfortable walking on the surface of the water as he was land. Aw man, even with his griping and pessimistic attitude, Naruto was able to easily walk atop the water in less than a week. It was an impressive sight to say the very least. Come on, sensei. Naruto whined. I gotta learn these so I can shove a fireball down Sasuke's throat. You know I saw him doing this years ago? Years, he repeated with bulging eyes. You will need to wait a little longer because I wouldn't dream of teaching you a fire technique before we could properly put it out, and this water jutsu will do just that. Now here are the hand signs. Gotcha. Naruto shouted gleefully as he cracked his neck. There was only 3 signs for the technique and he was determined to get them down easily. Not waiting for any signal, he began. Dragon, Tiger, Hare, Sweeten. Mizu Ranpa. Naruto was rewarded for his haste and lack of self-control with a mouthful of water that in turn became a small wave that splashed harmlessly against his chest, and boisterous laughter from a certain salamander. Kuso. Dokueki shook his head as Naruto went through the hand seals and retried again, and again until he got the technique down correctly. He has determination, I'll give him that much. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Naruto cried before a large fireball roughly 3 feet tall and 2 foot wide left his mouth and slammed into a boulder he had aimed for. Excellent. Now put it out before the Anbu comes rushing in and arrests you for damaging property. Hi, Sweeten. Mizu Ranpa. This time a much larger wave of water erupted from Naruto's mouth and overtook the roaring fire in front of him. The rock hissed as steam rose and the fire was effectively put out. While the fireball mirrored that of an oven or possibly a desk in size, the wall of water was easily 10 feet high and 6 feet wide. Interesting, Dokueki thought as Naruto perfected the only 2 offensive jutsus he knew. His affinity for water is only growing if he speaks the truth. Naruto, he said patiently. When you make a water clone, how do you feel? Fine, he chirped. Better now, though, to be honest. It's been getting easier and easier. I have even more energy nowadays when using them. To Dokueki it was plain as day the boy did not hold a complete affinity for water, and he would definitely not be turning any sheets of chakra paper to ash if his fireballs were anything to go by. Water doused fire while fire trumped wind. Wind sliced easily through lightning, but lightning held firm against earth. Earth brought everything home by besting water, thus repeating the cycle. Naruto's strength with fire, or lack thereof, was proof that his prowess with water was much stronger than that of his fire, and in turn his possible weakness against earth. If he did happen to hold an affinity for water, then that more likely than not left earth out of the category, leaving Naruto with the options of wind, water and lightning. 3 impressive choices given the circumstances and place of living. Lightning and water weren't natural enemies, but it was fairly uncommon for one to use both together without special training, and given his weakness to fire, the logical choice was wind, even though they were in Fire County. Even though Dokueki was a firm believer in blood, he wasn't quite ready to bet his money on Naruto holding an affinity for anything at the moment. They just have to wait and see. That is good, Naruto, he praised. Rest easy for now and we will soon begin the water walking exercise to help you gain even better control of your chakra reserves. Once you are able to perform every technique you know at top of a moving river, you will be ready for the final test. It will not be easy, but the best things in life are always worth the effort. He wasn't one to brag much. Okay, maybe he still did brag often, but it wasn't nearly as big of a loudmouth as he had once been not so long ago. Sometimes it felt like years when it had really only been months, and more months. They say time flew, and it seemed that not even Naruto realized he had actually been training with Dokueki for nearly a year. Standing atop a rapidly moving river and spewing forth waves of water that were 3 times his size had him really taking it all in. It honestly hadn't seemed real until he'd produced that first fireball and it had lit a tree ablaze like nothing. Sure, learning how to make clones and teleport and fight in new stances was cool, but destroying a tree with a few hand seals and words was something else, something much cooler. If only you could see me now, old man, Naruto thought as he bellowed out a fireball that sent water hissing and spraying atop of him and the patches of grass to his left and right. Very good, Naruto. Now come here and keep quiet while I speak. The authority in Dokueki's voice both frightened and excited him. I wish to tell you a story and I do not want to be interrupted by you. Naruto nodded quickly, settling himself in. There once was a boy named Hanzo. Let me get this straight, said Naruto slowly, digesting the information and picking it apart. You're only as small as you are because you don't have a proper ninja to summon you. It is the truth. Hanzo deems it beneath him to summon anything but the boss, Ibuse. Never met the prick myself. Hanzo that is, although Ibuse isn't a box of chocolates either, but from what Ibuse has said, he can be a right foul asshole sometimes and paranoid the rest. In essence, I, and several other salamanders, happen to be suffering due to his arrogance. We cannot grow stronger without being fed the chakra of a proper summoner. So you want me to be your summoner? Naruto questioned with barely withheld glee. He restrained himself a little, and now that he actually looked, Dokueki did seem to be a little larger. Little bastard's been feeding without my consent. Dokueki nodded and sighed as if resigning himself to a horrible fate. Naruto knew the salamander good enough to know he was simply messing with him and was actually quite pleased. You're trustworthy enough, and from the looks of things you have a plethora of untapped potential, he said, eyeing Naruto's navel for some odd reason. Fine, said Naruto eagerly. Where do I sign? First you must draw forth some of my blood and place it on your hands. Normally this would be your blood. Then make the hand signs as I tell you. Naruto listened intently and did just that, taking a kunai and using it to pick up a little of Dokueki's blood from a wound he made with the kunai before spreading it along his hands as if it was lotion. When it was layered nicely amongst them, he began going through the seals as Dokueki had instructed him, slowly, having been told the amount of chakra wouldn't matter for the time being. Boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram, Kachiyose no jutsu. Naruto shouted for the very first time before slamming his right hand down and waiting for a reaction. He didn't have to wait long, as not a moment later an old, positively fossil salamander the color of sour milk appeared with a scroll that looked too large for it strapped to its back. The salamander spared Naruto a look before bowing its head to Dokueki and allowing the scroll to fall of its back. Naruto wasted no time in unrolling the scroll and giving it a once-over. He didn't even gasp when he saw that Hanzo was the only name on the scroll, while using the same kunai as before to draw some blood from his pointer finger and signing his name. He was older now but still had to refrain from dotting the I in Uzumaki with a smiley face. He happily rolled up the scroll and attached it to the old salamander's back before turning to Dokueki, awaiting further orders. He must have been missing something as Dokueki sent another nod to the elder salamander, who nodded back and opened his mouth, belching forwards a bracelet of sorts. This will be your first test. You must summon 2 salamanders to help you fulfill this ritual of sorts. I take it any 2 ordinary salamanders won't do, will they? Asked Naruto, frowning. A salamander of water and fire is all you need, said Dokueki sagely. Naruto nodded in resignation and began going through hand seals. Kachiyose no jutsu. No, definitely not. That would be the egg and that would be the... Never mind. No, wait, there you go. Who dares summon me? A rather small, around half the size of Dokueki by Naruto's rough estimation, black and red salamander bellowed as loud as it could. Squinting, Naruto took in the little salamander's appearance. It was indeed black with red, tiger-like strips along its body with a burnt orange underbelly and bulging, round eyes that all salamanders seemed to have along with razor-sharp teeth. "Be quiet, youngling," snapped Dokueki. "This is the new summoner of our kin, Uzumaki Naruto." The red and black salamander eyed all three of them wearily. "What need do you have for me? How old are you, young one?" "4 winters," he said hesitantly. "Good. You will do. Keep summoning, Naruto. Aim for water this time." Naruto nodded and again he started summoning. It only took him 3 tries this time till he had a salamander slightly larger than Dokueki in front of him amongst many other little salamanders that were milling about. This one was black, with blue bubble-like shapes along his back and a cream-colored underbelly. The teeth and eyes were much the same. "Yo," it said as a friendly way of greeting, grinning at them with its sharp teeth. "Begin the ritual," said Dokueki quietly. All the salamanders nodded seriously and began to move without hesitation. Naruto was the only one confused as all of the little salamanders he had summoned circled around him, the red and black salamander, the blue and black salamander, the old salamander, and Dokueki. Suddenly the red and black salamander began spewing forth flames that abruptly engulfed the bracelet the older salamander had released from its mouth. While this was happening, the blue and black salamander began sucking in air and Naruto could feel the air around him become colder though the night was warm. Naruto was very confused. "That is good," said Dokueki, eyeing the flames. "Hold out your arm, Naruto." He did so without hesitation, already having a pretty good idea of what was about to happen. Still, he couldn't hold in his cry of pain that erupted from his mouth when the red-hot metal was placed around his right wrist securely. Time seemed to go on forever as his skin was literally burned black. With a nod from Dokueki, that blue and black salamander began spewing forth ice-cold water that immediately soothed the burning wound on his arm. Without another word, the old salamander used its elongated tongue to snatch up the bracelet, swallowing it whole right before a green glow courtesy of Dokueki swarmed his cooling wound, healing it. Grimacing and twitching every so often, Naruto eyed the tattoo on his wrist. It was black as the night, but the skin around it was a little red and raw. Turning his wrist, he finally took in the design. It was a salamander with a tail wrapping itself snugly around the inside of his wrist and connecting to the head of the salamander, which rested at the top of his wrist, lined perfectly with his middle finger. If one looked close enough, it looked as though the salamander was eating its own tail. "It is done." As one, all of the salamanders surrounding the group bowed their heads slightly before disappearing. "You may leave now," said Dokueki. The salamander that held the scroll was gone a moment later. "Wait, why?" Naruto questioned, eyeing the 2 salamanders that had participated in the ritual with interest. "Why not?" questioned Dokueki right back. "Well, I figured those 2 could stay with us," he said, pointing to the red and blue salamanders. "Why's that?" asked the red salamander angrily. "Look at me, I'm tiny." Naruto didn't doubt that the little salamander had insecurity issues. He'd once been the same before he started kicking some ass. Naruto shrugged, smiling. "So am I, but I can't spew flames like that either, not yet anyway." Besides, Dokueki said that he'd get bigger now that he has a proper summoner to train with, so hopefully you guys will too. We'll all get stronger together. You're willing to train with us, help us get stronger, instead of casting us aside and settling for stronger of our kind? Asked the blue salamander hesitantly, almost disbelievingly. "Yup, now what are your guys' names?" "I'm Naruto." "Yakedo," said the red and black salamander curtly, still eyeing Naruto distrustfully. The blue and black salamander gave Naruto a searching look before grinning broadly. "Say." Dokueki eyed the 3 of them with a toothy grin. "And so it begins." The time for Naruto to truly show Konoha had not come yet, but it was nearing and he would be ready when it did. He'd be ready for anything. The dead last Dobi was gone and a truly competent shinobi stood in his sandals. He was ready for anything the Hokage and village had to throw at him, and he was going to face it with his chin held high. The prologue to the tale of Uzumaki Naruto was finally ending and the beginning of the legend was rapidly approaching. He had passed all the tests given to him so far. The next was graduation and he had time to get ready. "Wait till they get a load of me." Naruto strode confidently through the streets of Konohagakure no Sato with a grin plastered onto his whiskered face and his fingers interlocked behind his neck. It was time to shine and show Konoha what he was made of. By the end of the day he'd have a shiny forehead protector holding up his neon blonde locks instead of the orange headband that currently did. Nothing could put him down, not now and not anymore. He'd long since become pretty much immune, or so he thought, to the glares sent his way, which had been dwindling down as of late, mainly due to the semi-serious attitude he had picked up over the past couple of years. It still hurt somewhat. He wouldn't be human if it didn't hurt, but he gained friends and battled the pain and loneliness that had tried to corrupt his fragile heart. He wasn't alone anymore, and it was all thanks to a salamander. Naruto fingered the clear black marking around wrist with a gentle finger, rubbing it from the snout of the salamander that looked to be snarling all the way till its tail was being swallowed. Sometimes in the right lighting the salamander almost looked alive. Shrugging, Naruto began sprinting towards the academy for his last day. It was time to become a genin, finally. Several shopkeepers shouted obscenities as a black and orange blur surged past them, ruffling their hair and sending small objects askew. Who said Uzumaki Naruto didn't prank or cause mischief anymore? Coming to a stop, Naruto looked over himself with a critical eye in the pond that stood proud before one could enter the academy doors. He still wore orange, obviously, how could he not? But it wasn't as major as it had been or would have been had he kept the tracksuit. For bottoms he wore a black pair of shorts along with tape that covered his shins, calves, ankles and stopped just short of his knees, with the tape itself reaching into the black shinobi sandals he wore. A bright orange belt held up his shorts when he remembered to put it on. For a top he wore a black and orange long-sleeved turtleneck that was lined with a light but durable material for helping guard himself against some kunai and shuriken, guarding his chest, back and throat, along with two identical orange spots on his elbows in the shape of what he had learned was the Uzumaki clan symbol. There was also a black, hood-like piece of cloth that could be pulled up to cover his blonde hair at a moment's notice, and an equally black piece that could cover his face and, more importantly, whisker marks. Kunai and shuriken holsters were strapped to his each thigh, and a fanny pack, much to his displeasure even if it was orange, was strapped around his waist, holding a little bit of everything: senbon, ninja wire, smoke bombs, solitaire and blood pills, exploding tags, bandages and everything else a ninja might need in the field. Besides, he thought, sending himself a confident wink, with all the training I've been doing I now have even more muscles. I look totally badass now. It was quite true. Due to the much harsher physical training he had been forced to undergo, if only to satisfy Dokueki and his fellow salamanders Yakedo and Sei, he was seeing the end results after almost 2 years. He'd all but mastered the salamander style, and his new build was proof of that. He would never be overly muscular, but he had gotten taller with wiry muscles that filled him out nicely. No one in his graduating class dare call him a shrimp and get away with it. There wasn't much more the salamanders could teach him besides their clan techniques, collaboration jutsus they had worked on together, a few basic jutsus they had picked up along the way, and some chakra control lessons, but Naruto valued all of their knowledge and respected their words above many others. His choice of clothing had been a lesson in itself he would never forget. Ninja do not wear orange, Naruto. Not a smart ninja anyways. You will wear black. Why? Black shows no pain, no fear, no blood. Black shows no weakness, and you will not be weak. We will not be weak, and we will show no weakness. We will crush our enemies and protect our loved ones, and when you finally decided to quit being a ninja I will have an orange shirt ready for you. The salamanders had friended him in a time of need and turned a moron into a competent ninja, and he would not turn his back on them. He never went back on his word. It was his nindo, his ninja way. Smiling as he walked, Naruto thought of the 3 salamanders that had forever changed his life. Dokueki used to spend most of his time with Naruto. He still did on a certain level, having lived with him for a time, but after growing to the size of an Inuzuka hound he couldn't continue moving unnoticed and decided to simply heed Naruto's call like a normal summon, moving back to wherever salamanders lived. Naruto was still not that privileged to know that bit of info. Sei had continued to grow, and Naruto was quite proud to say that the top of his head was at least 20 feet from the ground. The day he rode atop of him in the Forest of Death was one of the happiest moments of his life. Yakedo had also grown in size, leveling with that of a wagon and carriage, and his flames had nearly caused a forest fire on more than one occasion. He'd met a few other salamanders, but none had stuck around like the trio since that fateful day. Others did comment on his wonderful garden of tasty herbs he usually kept stocked next to his window. He desperately wanted to summon the boss, Ibuse, but all three had forbid him. Summoning Ibuse would surely alert Hanzo to another summoner of salamanders, and that was only a problem, and they could not have that. Hanzo was paranoid enough, or so all three had said, and the idea of someone using his summons was practically treason. Snorting, Naruto sidestepped a pretty brunette with a stack of papers in her hands and made his way into Iruka's classroom for the last time as an academy student and civilian. The class was practically buzzing with excitement as Naruto made his way towards his tight-knit group of friends. Tubby, sleepy, smelly. 2 growls and a snort were his answers. Turning, he greeted the other 2 boys in the class who held some sort of respect from him. Bug boy, Teme. Shino's no doubt monotone retort was interrupted by Ino and Sakura barging their way into the classroom, apparently fighting over who would get to the classroom first as if it was some kind of race. Knowing who the 2 kunoichi's minds worked, if only just a little, he didn't doubt that was what they were actually doing. Naruto watched as they shoved their way to find a seat next to Sasuke. It was a recurring act and happened several times a week. I never wished I was the Teme before, but I wouldn't mind it if for only a few hours. Haruno Sakura and Yamanaka Ino had only gotten prettier over the years in his opinion. Both of them had athletically fit and still developing bodies, but the outline they would hold later in life were still there. Both also had the most beautiful shades of green eyes he'd even seen. Their eyes could be a forest green when they were mad and as bright as emeralds when they were happy. And Eep caught his attention. It seemed that Hyuga Hinata had arrived. Naruto'd be lying if he said she wasn't cute, as she was, especially when she got all flustered, or hot and bothered, as Kiba liked to call it. She just didn't hold the confidence Ino had or the tenacity that Sakura did. She was simply shy and in the background, and Naruto did not find that attractive in any way, shape or form. Sometimes he wondered why a kind girl like her was even a ninja, then remembered what family she came from. He needed a woman that would slap him in the face and take his bowl of ramen away from him, not plead with him to have something healthier. Shuddering slightly from his own horrifying train of thought, he leaned back in his seat and waited for Iruka to arrive. It was time to graduate already. Quiet, quiet, Iruka grumbled as he made his way into the classroom several minutes later, much too late for Naruto's tastes. Ohio, Iruka-sensei. Several people chorused as their sensei entered the room, Naruto being one of them. Today, as you already know, you will be taking your final exams, the jutsu portion, that is. We will start with the clone technique, then move on to the transformation technique, and finally the substitution technique. The room next door will be where the exams are administered when I call your name. The class had taken the written exams yesterday along with the taijutsu portion of the exam, and all that was left was the practical ninjutsu portion. Naruto would have liked nothing more to have another good brawl with Sasuke. They had actually came to a draw in the taijutsu finals the day before. But that was behind them, and he had to settle for reliving some tension twirling a leaf on his pointer finger. It was also a basic piece of chakra control. He had gotten much better, but his reserves never seemed to stop growing, and complete control always seemed to be just out of his grasp. Naruto could only sit patiently, slowly rotating a leaf as name after name was called. Nearly everyone in the class was gone when his name was finally called. Had he still been the loudmouth idiot he used to be, okay. Maybe he still was. He'd have probably cracked under the pressure of waiting. "Alright, Naruto," said Iruka-sensei, smiling pleasantly. "Make at least 3 clones." "Easy," Naruto boasted, quickly performing the hand seals. Bunshin no Jutsu. A dozen perfect clones shimmered to life behind Naruto. 3 basic clones were still out of his league, and he didn't feel like answering the questions that came along with knowing how to perform water clones. Mizuki's eyes narrowed. He said 3, boy. Maybe I should have just made the water clones. Iruka raised an eyebrow at the somewhat hostile treatment. He provided more than enough to prove he is capable of the technique, Mizuki-san. I believe a transformation is next, Naruto-kun. Feel free to pick your choice. Flexing his arms, Naruto made a hand seal. Henge, an exact clone of Mizuki, appeared in front of Iruka and Mizuki. Naruto made a show of picking Mizuki's nose. And finally, substitute yourself with that dummy leaning against the back wall. 5 hand seals later and Naruto was leaning against the wall with the dummy in front of the 2 teachers. Iruka beamed with pride. Mizuki on the other hand looked as though he'd been stabbed in the thigh with a kunai. Ahem, Naruto cleared his throat. I'll take my Hite 8 in black, please. Naruto did his best not to grin too much as he made a show of adjusting his forehead protector every couple of seconds, making sure to do it in the presence of the villagers who didn't seem to like him. That was something he'd need to figure out. Why did they dislike him? He was positive Dokueki knew on some level but the Salamander hadn't told him. It was almost as if the Salamander held some of the cards, but not all and didn't want to assume wrong. Adjusting his forehead protector one more, Naruto giggled before dashing down the street, his destination, home. Not only was he very exhausted and tired as he had just gorged himself on ramen for the first time in what seemed like ages, but he also wanted to let Dokueki and the others know the good news. He couldn't really summon the other 2 anymore as he didn't really want it to be public knowledge he was fraternizing with the enemy, and they were quite big, but Dokueki wouldn't collapse his apartment if he summoned him in his living room. The secrecy of his summons was something that worried him on at least a weekly basis. When he'd been younger he'd been petrified that the Anbu would find and execute them for having played some part in the defeat of the Sannin all those years ago. Dokueki and the rest had put his mind at ease by letting him know if forced to flee they could easily escape. Naruto also wasn't one to jump to conclusions much, but he had these feelings that the old man knew who he'd been training with but chose not to speak out. If anything, he seemed to approve. As it was, Naruto's dangerous senses were on high alert when he entered his apartment. His door had already been wide open. The quiet sound of someone sipping tip was heard coming from his kitchen. It didn't dampen at all when he entered said kitchen only to find Mizuki drinking tea out of one of his cups, a large scroll to his left and a kunai to his right side. Mizuki-sensei? Naruto questioned, ready for combat at a moment's notice. Years of training would do that to you. Take a seat, Naruto. Naruto had dealt with much unpleasantness his whole life and Mizuki was barely holding himself from leaping across the table and jabbing him in his blue eyes with whatever he could get his greasy hands on. I think it'd be best if you just left, Mizuki. His glacial tone or loss of the honorific was not lost on Mizuki, who dropped the somewhat pleasant look and a look of absolute fury overtook his face. You wouldn't want me to tell the Hokage about you breaking into my house now, would you? You won't be speaking much once I'm through with you, boy, he sneered before he leapt into action. Outside of Naruto's apartment building, civilians and ninja alike could only gape as a Fuma shuriken took out a window of the apartment. They all knew that boy lived in a moment before civilians and ninja on the other side of the building saw a fireball the size of a fruit stand take out the entire wall. Naruto had never been more thankful in his entire life for the fact that nobody wanted to live in the same section of his apartment building as him. He hadn't thought about the possible drawbacks of using a fire jutsu in an apartment building, let alone the building his apartment was in, until he actually saw one tear through the wall in a shower of flames and wood. He couldn't help but grimace at his thoroughly destroyed apartment. A choked and gagging coughing sound broke his slight moment of mourning. Making his way through the dust, fire and debris, he came upon the site of his former teacher, whom lay bloody and beaten where his kitchen used to be. The fireball hadn't even hit him. No, a part of the ceiling had crushed him instead as he was gaping at the technique Naruto had used while a beam properly skewed him through his lower stomach. Naruto looked impassively at the man who had helped teach him for the past few years. I'm disappointed in you, Mizuki-sensei, he quipped. I figured an academy teacher like you would have at least been aware of your own surroundings. Mizuki spat blood on his feet. Very mature, sensei. Mizuki squirmed beneath the large piece of ceiling atop him, managing a sneer. I always knew you really were the demon, and this just proves it. He gave a raspy chuckle. I'll be viewed as a hero when word on my death gets back to the Hokage, he boasted. I can see it now. Hero teacher Mizuki is killed by the Kyuubi reincarnated. They'll execute you for this. He crowed. No, Mizuki, you'll only be executed for treason, said Iruka sadly from behind them, shuffling through the debris. Naruto could hardly think of anything, let alone greet the man he had to look up to as an older brother or possibly even uncle figure. So that was it. He was the Kyuubi. He vaguely remembered being called a monster and demon on a few rare occasions and was quickly able to piece it together. The fact that the Kyuubi had also caused Iruka's parents' death had bile rising in his throat. Do you hate me too, Iruka-sensei? He found himself asking after several long moments. Mizuki chuckled darkly, insane even. Of course he does, he spat. You killed his entire family. Mizuki broke into a fit of pained laughs. That is a lie, Iruka shouted, gazing at Naruto with tear-filled eyes. It's a lie, Naruto, he pressed. In the beginning, I won't lie. I found you to be nothing but a troublemaker like I was. He chuckled, tears falling down his scarred face. But I listened to the words of a few wise men and I came to acknowledge you as Uzumaki Naruto and not the nine-tailed demon fox that destroyed my life. No matter what anyone says, Naruto, you're a good person, not the fox. Naruto could only bow his head as he let the tears held for years fall. He didn't know why he was crying. Was it because he held the nine-tailed fox that many believed dead? Was it because he had been lied to his whole life? Was it because he now had a reason for all the unjust treatment he received, or was it because Iruka really did care about him? The thought that he just annihilated a Chunin-level ninja in Mortal Kombat as well as destroyed his own home never even crossed his mind. He didn't know, and at the moment he didn't care. Training and all badassness aside, he allowed himself to be pulled into a grateful hug where he bawled his eyes out for the first time in years. I think we need to see the Hokage, said Iruka as Mizuki gave a final gasp and died where he lay, nobody mourning his loss. He would not be recognized as the hero he had hoped. Uzumaki Naruto would later see him as the man that helped change his life for the better cause. Had he not acted, who knows how he would have turned out. So the Yondaime couldn't kill the fox, Naruto bit out. He was trembling with anger. Instead, the bastard decided to stick it in my gut. He hadn't shouted, but he was very close to screaming. Naruto, said Sarutobi sadly, being a Hokage means making sacrifices for the better of the village. The Yondaime knew this when he gave his very life to defeat the fox, and you should know this by carrying the burden you do. His wishes that you be seen as a hero may have been for nothing, but do not spit on his sacrifice, for he has never once scorned you. Why? He asked desperately, eyes pleading. Why, old man? I know you know why. You have to know, or else you wouldn't know as much as you do. He gave a hysterical chuckle. The Hokage knows everything. Sarutobi looked sadly at the young man before him that he considered as good as his own. Was there ever something you knew that could cost many people their lives, Naruto-kun? He asked with a knowing grin, and Naruto knew the secret was both out and safe with the old man. Maybe, said Naruto weakly. Sarutobi chuckled while affectionately rubbing the top of Naruto's head. He didn't bother protesting. This is that kind of secret. The very knowledge of anything involving you, the nine-tailed fox and the Yondaime, could cause a war. I don't doubt that people will lose their lives in the near future over this exact subject. I don't want people to die for me, Naruto shouted. The third shook his head. That is the pain that comes with being the Hokage, Naruto-kun, but that isn't what I'm talking about right now. For now though, you must get stronger, Naruto-kun, for me, the village, your friends, and most importantly, yourself. But do not walk the path of solidarity like those seeking power before you. The Sandaime looked very seriously at Naruto, and for the first time he saw the professor, the god of shinobi, and not Gigi. The will of fire burns brightly in you, Naruto-kun, and it is my hope that you will pass it on to those after you someday, like me, the Yondaime, and the many other ninjas before you. Nani? Sarutobi rubbed his chin in thought and slight frustration, deciding to go with the simple answers for the time being. Passionate speech or not, Naruto just wasn't getting it, it seemed. The Kyuubi is an entity of chakra and power. People fear and respect power, but most of all, people want power. People want the Kyuubi? Naruto questioned. His mind had always been sharp and he didn't miss much. Sarutobi nodded. You will learn more about this in due time, but that is what you need to know. He smiled at Naruto. You've made me very proud, Naruto. I still remember you as the little boy who needed help doing homework, and now you are an actual ninja of this very village. You've made me so proud, Naruto. Naruto gave an odd, hiccuping sound. Thanks, old man. I'm going to hold you to your word about everything we talked about today. Believe it. Sarutobi chuckled and began fishing through his desk before finding something and tossing it to Naruto. It was a set of keys. Naruto didn't even need to ask why before Sarutobi started speaking. Those are the keys that belong to a house not too far from where you used to live. With your apartment having been destroyed, you will need a new place of residence, yes? Naruto shrugged, not really having thought about it. Why these though? For some odd reason the old man's eyes began twinkling. The house is but a simple 4-bedroom with 2 bathroom, living room, kitchen and dining room, but that isn't what's important. The house itself belonged to a woman whom lost her life during the Kyuubi's attack on this village, Uzumaki Kushina. Naruto gaped at the keys in his hand. A relative of mine? He asked weakly. Sarutobi smiled sadly. I dare say she was a relative of yours. Not many people know this, Naruto, but she was actually the Yondaimi's wife. Wow, Naruto whispered in awe. I'm going to be living in the house that belonged to the Yondaimi's wife. You could even say you're living in the Yondaimi's house, Naruto. The house you should have grown up in along with a loving family. Thanks, Gigi. But why are you giving it to me? He asked, biting his lip. It felt right, he admitted. Because it belonged to you, Naruto. Okay, said Naruto, smiling, not perturbed by his answer at all. I'll be going now. Yes, said Sarutobi, nodding his head and smiling kindly. Don't forget you have to get your picture taken, and Konohamaru has been asking for you too, Naruto. Konohamaru? My grandson, said the third. Naruto rubbed his chin in thought. Konohamaru, he mumbled. You mean the brat with the blue scarf and fan club? Sarutobi sighed. That would be him. Alright, I have an awesome new jutsu I want to show him to put that perverted sensei of his in his place. Why do I not like the sound of that? Sarutobi thought as images of naked blonde women with curves to die for covered partially with erotically placed pieces of smoke flashed before his eyes. Naruto shook his head and turned to leave as a thin trail of blood made its way out of the Hokage's nose. The black and white salamander eyed him calmly. I did not know you held the mightiest of all bijus, but I suspected it, yes. You know of my ability to sense chakra, and I was able to surmise that is what it was. Several times during our training did the chakra make itself present, not enough to truly worry about it but just enough for a sensor like myself to feel it. Naruto sighed. He wasn't mad at Dokueki as there wasn't a real way of him truly ever knowing. I'm just blaming everyone right now, he admitted, chuckling ruefully and picking whatever belongings he had that actually managed to survive out of his house. Dokueki chuckled. I see. I am quite impressed you managed to perform a fireball large enough to wipe out an entire wall, even if it was your own wall. What can I say, I'm just that good. Naruto boasted, trailing off and pulling a slightly charred scroll from beneath the rubble. He gave it a once-over before a large grin began splitting his face. What is it? Nothing, he teased, still smiling, if possible, even wider. Just a scroll that idiot Mizuki Teme stole before he came to a sticky end. He just so happened to be kind enough to leave it behind. Naruto liked to think of himself as humble yet proud, hyper yet contemplative, loud yet caring. Yahoo! My new house rocks. He shouted from the balcony overlooking the streets of Konoha below him. Was it just his thoughts, or did Kami really bless him by placing his new home right next to Ichiraku's ramen stand? Humble indeed, Dokueki murmured from his spot on their new leather couch. Hey, Naruto snapped, turning to the salamander. Don't get any mud on my couch. I know how your kind likes to burrow underground from time to time. My kind, your new couch? Dokueki demanded hotly. Yeah, he shouted back, leaping atop a table to gain some ground. And just who taught you the fire technique that destroyed your old home, Naruto flushed and took a step down. You know, that isn't something to be proud of. Dokueki shrugged and burrowed himself a little into the couch. If the ends justify the means. I guess, Naruto murmured as he moved to the kitchen and checked the fridge. It had nothing and he would have been heartbroken, had he not just moved into the house across the way from Ichiraku's. Should I invite the others? Too big nowadays, said Dokueki sleepily. But Chikai and his little buddies have been asking about you. I noticed that there's also a garden in the back. They can play there if you don't want them in here. Naruto nodded and drew a kunai before poking the salamander marking on his wrist where the eye would be, drawing the tiniest amount of blood his body would allow before healing itself just as quickly. I guess I have the fox to thank for that. Kuchiyose no jutsu, he said. No hand signs were needed with his marking. There was a puff, and Naruto wasn't surprised to see a small group of 3 chibi salamanders. They couldn't understand and converse with Naruto yet, but they sure as hell knew how to cause mayhem. Naruto shook his head as they raced across kitchen tops he had yet to break in. They remind me of Konohamaru and his gang of misfits. Dokuiki's head popped out from beneath one of the cushions. It was an odd sight as he was nearly as large as the couch itself. Now that is a group of idiots. They're not that bad, Naruto shot back. Yes they are. Did you get a look at those horrible goggles they all wear? I wonder what idiot gave them that idea, he muttered. Naruto cut off his retort and flushed an angry red as he fled away and went through the rest of the house. Dokuiki did not need to know he had gotten the three of them the goggles as a present upon them entering the academy. He had always wanted to wear goggles but having grown up felt it would be too childish. As he left the second bathroom that was actually smaller than the one attached to what he could only guess was the master bedroom, he marveled at his new home. Having lived in an apartment most of his life and the orphanage the rest, they saw fit to kick him out once the decision that he be allowed to enter the ninja academy was confirmed. He never really had much to call his own. Sure, he'd always had the clothes on his back and the stuff in his apartment, but it wasn't nearly as major as the home he currently had. The old man had said it was his. He mentioned nothing about paying rent or anything like that. He'd even hazard a guess and say that there was some scroll with his name on it calling him owner of the land. Sure, he now probably had to pay for his own water, electricity and heating, but it was worth it and it was his choice. At his old apartment he wasn't given the option of the extra stuff, like hot water and a warm apartment during winter. That choice was taken away and he was graciously given water rivaling that of the lakes outside during the cold winter months. He could have made a fuss about it to the old man, but what good would it really do? He'd complained before and the old man had actually fired the manager of a few stores who had either refused him service, or overcharged him on their goods. The stores had rehired and the replacements had done the exact same thing and the bitterness from the community had only grown. Eventually it just wasn't worth the trouble. At least I now know why, he thought sadly, going through the drawers of a desk in the master bedroom he had deemed his. Fools, he sighed, to think I'm the Kyuubi and not its jailer. In a very sad and depressing way, it made a whole lot of sense. The civilians had always treated him colder than the ninjas did, and that was to be guessed as they were just idiotic civilians who were, well, idiots who didn't understand the finer points of being a ninja. They saw the ninjas as the cool people, not really understanding that while they protected and served them, they were, in fact, cold-blooded killers who would snap their necks if the Hokage deemed it fitting to protect their home. The ninjas who treated him frostily were the older ones, whom he'd learned had more likely than not lost family and friends in the Kyuubi attack, and the younger ones who'd been taught that he was a monster. These select numbers weren't quite old enough to remember the Kyuubi attack itself, but were young enough not to know him by person and thus had judged him through second-hand, tainted information. My generation and those after me see me as a person, he thought, thinking of Choji, Kiba, Shikamaru and even Konohamaru. But for how long? Naruto shook his head as he removed his sandals, headband and plopped onto his new bed. The sheets felt smooth under his touch and he practically melted into the mattress. All this didn't help ease his mind. Would his friends hate him for what he held when they found out? His friends came from ninja clans and he knew some of them must have lost at least someone during the Kyuubi attack. To think every clan from his class came out unharmed was absurd. He swallowed the lump in his throat as his eyes burned with that oh-so-familiar itch before turning over and putting his face in a pillow. The shaking begun moments later. Dokuiki could only watch sadly as Naruto slowly and silently cried himself to sleep. "Look, boss even has rooms for us, hey!" Konohamaru shouted. Naruto ignored the blissful cries of Moegi and Udon. "Konohamaru," Naruto sighed. "Those are extra rooms but they weren't put there for you, Moegi and Udon to move into." He was tired both emotionally and physically. He really didn't want to deal with them at the moment and was severely tempted to push them off to the side with the help of a water clone. "But boss," he pouted, "if I'm to be your apprentice and successor, then how will I grow stronger if I don't live with you?" Naruto's eyes started twitching dangerously. "I never said I was going to let you become my apprentice." "That's right, Konohamaru-kun," said Udon with an ever-present line of snot hanging from his nose. Naruto was forced to hold himself back, thus keeping him from literally wiping the snot off the kid. Who knew how bad that snot would ruin his new carpet? If boss is gonna train us all, he couldn't possibly have just one apprentice. Moegi squealed. "This house needs a woman's touch, but I can make it work," she said, eyeing the cream-colored walls with distaste. She could care less about training it seemed and was more partial to moving in with Naruto. That kind of scared the freshly minted genin, even though the thought of painting the walls a fresh color had crossed his mind too. "If you three don't leave we're all going to play ninja again," said Naruto patiently and quite pleasantly. At all three of their excited looks Naruto grinned evilly, missing ninja. Ninja was a game he usually played with Konohamaru, Moegi and Udon ever since meeting the young Sarutobi. It was a glorified game hide and seek. Missing ninja was ninja with Naruto playing a psychotic missing nin who captured and tortured instead of just finding. Naruto was positive Konohamaru would never forget the day he met the one-tailed demon cat Tora. Konohamaru looked shakily up at Naruto. "Boss, there's no need to be so hasty, hey," he said weakly. Naruto shrugged and began twirling a kunai lazily on his finger. It only terrified the three ninjas in training more that the kunai appeared to come from nowhere. "There are so many things kunais can be used for, ya know?" he said casually. "They can be used for peeling vegetables in the field, killing, cutting up firewood, torturing enemies for information and even using them as anchors to set up a tent or hammock. Did I mention they are also used for killing?" Konohamaru swallowed and began edging towards the door. "We're gonna go now, boss." "So soon?" said Naruto, pouting. "But I just got a new shipment of explosive tags." He trailed in disappointment when he noticed the Konohamaru core had disappeared. Munching on a stick of dango, Naruto looked over the charred scroll. Since the move he'd started gorging himself on ramen once more. Dokueki liked the stuff as much as he did but Sei was not a fan of anything watery and Yakedo liked cold food, oddly enough. In the early days he'd been literally forced into eating other foods, and even though he knew it was good for him, sometimes he just couldn't help himself. He lived right across the street from Ichiraku's. Did they not understand that? Naruto shook his head and took another bite of the dango. It was all right but it didn't even hold a candle to ramen of any kind. Snorting, he nearly choked on a dumpling as he thought of how he actually got the dango. That crazy lady Anko had practically dragged him from his seat at Ichiraku's and forced a bag of dango into his hands in what she considered was a nice gesture. Naruto finished the last of his dango and smoothed out the creases in the scroll and read over the few techniques it actually held. Shadow clone technique. Oh. I like the sound of these clones very much. Telescope technique. Sneaky old man. Summoning. Impure world resurrection. Now that's just gross. And the great clone. He trailed off, shivering in anticipation. The day he used that last technique on an enemy was going to be a glorious day indeed. Putting the scroll down, he ran his hands along his face and turned. "You looked over this already, didn't you?" "I did," Dokueki freely admitted. "Your chakra control and lack of abilities as a sensor will hinder your chances at effectively using the spying jutsu. The summoning jutsu is one I'd only have you use as a very last resort as it takes life to use. The shadow clones will rapidly help improve your training when you have more material to learn amongst other things and the last will be a painful surprise to anyone trying to harm you." "What did you mean training with shadow clones?" Naruto asked, sitting down and crossing his legs. "Did you even read what it said?"